Okay, today we have Wes King. He is a program manager for MVP, which is Merging Vets and Athletes in the Seattle chapter. And he's also a former Army Ranger. So, Wes, it's great to have you. Welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for having me, everyone. And it's a pleasure. I can't wait to get to know you all and share my story. Like Sarah said, I was a former Army Ranger. So I was with the 2nd Ranger Battalion from February of '06 to December 2012. With that, I was on 7 combat deployments with them. So 3 to Iraq, 4 to Afghanistan. With that, around 200 plus special operations raids under my belt. So I've been around the block in both Afghanistan and Iraq. I would say about 35% to 40% of those raids, there was some sort of traumatic event that happened, whether that was EKIA, friendly wounded in action, or what have you. The Rangers' op tempo was so high back then that we would be on these deployments that would go for 3 months and then back for 6. And so for about 7 years, it was a constant cycle of deployments. And even like on my first deployment of the 90 days that we were there, we did 73 missions on that first deployment, and multiple missions a night sometimes. And so it was just crazy, crazy, crazy. And that was in 2006, my first one. Super kinetic at that time in Iraq. And I think my first 2 deployments in Iraq in '06 and '07 were, if you add up all of the other ones that I went on, were more traumatic than them, which is kind of crazy because some of the other stuff that happened later on was just as insane. So after I got out of the military, I went to school at Central Washington University. And so I deployed my last time, got back in October. I got out of the Army in December and then started school on my 26th birthday in January, which is January 3rd. So less than a month, less than 3 weeks actually to transition from the military to what I was doing next. So that was a really quick transition at that time. And that, like I said, it was in 2012. And so with that, getting out of the military, I had a plan. Well, my plan was to stay in like my career, my whole life, right? Got out because of a bunch of events that had happened while I was in that pushed me kind of out of the military for multiple reasons. And while I was going to school at Central, it was such a quick turnaround. It was like I was still in Ranger brain. And so go to class, sit in class, answer every question that every teacher ever asks. I aced all of my classwork, all of my tests for the first quarter, because like that's what you do, right? When you get out of the military, you're in the military, you're structured, you're told what to do, and you have to do it every single step of it every day. Every minute is accounted for, right? But get out with zero sort of transitional like training or time, and as soon as my noon class is over, I'm free to do what? And in the military, when you have your breaks, you start drinking, and this is something that I leaned in heavily to before I even knew that I was going through the PTSD symptoms that I was going through. And just to go back, because of those combat deployments I was on there, and like how kinetic they were, like I was already getting symptoms in like 2010. So 2 years before I got out of the military, I was having like hallucinations, nightmares. I remember vividly one night when I was laying in bed, woke up to a nightmare, and there's a severed human leg laying next to me in my bed, and it's real. I pick it up, I hold it, I drop it, run to my light, put the light on, and it's gone. And that was between like my 5th and 6th combat deployment. So that's just like, okay, what is this? This isn't something I can deal with right now. I need to continue on and going on with my missions. And so continue my career, start being, are you guys all familiar, all guys and gals familiar with like the post-deployment health assessments that they would make you do? And I know, Grizzly, you said that you're a civilian ally, which what we would have to do before and after was fill out a health assessment of how we felt we were before and how we feel when we come home. And when you're doing it as a private and younger, all of your leadership's like, just lie, just everything's fine, everything's fine. And when I become a leader and everything's not fine, I start saying these things are not fine on my post-deployment health assessments, and what happens? Nothing. I go to the therapist right before I'm getting out at my last post-deployment health assessment. And I go, I have nightmares. I can't sleep at night. And he goes, do you drink energy drinks? I go, yeah. He goes, well, caffeine has a 12-hour half-life. So that's probably what's keeping you up at night. And I'm just like, okay, guy, get out of the military. And then I'm okay, well, maybe just stop drinking caffeine and my nightmares will go away, you know, and it was absurd. So this is again in 2012 when they were still kind of figuring out a lot of the transitional programs while doing this, right? So let's go back to where I'm at Central. I'm at Central, I'm drinking. The drinking leads to drugs. I'm going through every sort of drug that you can think of that you can't shoot at. I didn't shoot anything in my body, but thank God. Because I didn't know what was going on. I didn't understand what the turmoil was that was inside of my brain. And even when I was like, I would be walking home from class, a blacked out BMW would be rolling by, the back window rolls down, and I see a Middle Eastern guy, and I jump in a bush. Like, and this is in like the middle of Washington State. Like, there's no threat, there's no issue, but that's just a reflex. And I'm like, what just happened? Like, I don't know what I'm experiencing, right? And so in the military, you suck it up, you move on, right? And this is what I think I have to do. When I reach out to some of my Ranger buddies, some of them that are still in the military or had gotten out, and I tell them what's going on, I get laughed at. Like, they're like, oh, that's not how Rangers, that's not the way that people, you suck it up and keep going. And it made me not try to seek help, right? And so we get into I get into this program through one of my friends who, former Ranger buddy of mine, he's living in Chicago, and he has this, he works for an advertising agency, and he has this internship program that while I'm going through all this shit at college, I was kind of like, dude, I have no idea what I want to do. Like, I take this internship, even though my degree is in recreation management, so parks and rec management, like Ron Swanson, that's what I kind of wanted to do, right? So I'm getting this internship in advertising. I go out to Chicago and I crush it. And even like the individuals that have been going to school for marketing and advertising for 4 years, like Northwestern University, I beat out for a job because of my Army Ranger background and a recreation management degree, but simply because I was a leader. And in the corporate world, they're having issues finding true leaders that can take a non-stressful situation or a stressful situation and handle it in a non-stressful way. So they were taking these special operators, putting them in charge of these advertising teams and crushing it. I was on Boeing Defense's advertising team selling Chinook helicopters to Germany. Like, we were like translating these ads to sell our military hardware that I was literally the only person on the team that has even seen in action, like, or in person or touched. So it was a really unique and amazing job, but I fucking hated my life, right? And because it was not fulfilling. And I'm so sorry for swearing because this is supposed to be a professional podcast, but I hated my life. And I every day on this bus to work, I'd be like, what am I doing? What I was one of the top tier military unit members, and now I'm sitting on this bus going and sitting in an office and getting talked down to because people don't know what I've been through, right? And one day, and this is all like, I guess what I'm trying to say is I lost my sense of purpose, if that makes sense. Once I got out and I had nowhere to go and no purpose, I start spinning and doing all these negative behaviors that pull me down. Right? So I'm on this bus on my way to work in Chicago, and this dude sits in front of me, and this is in 2016. He opens a newspaper. I'm like, what the? This guy's reading an actual newspaper on the bus when you have a cell phone where you can look at these articles all day long, right? The front page of this newspaper says, "Veteran gives life, giving back to community." And I'm like, okay, I'm intrigued. I start reading creepily on his paper, like this article, and it's about this gentleman who was in the Marines, who came back home, joined a program called Urban Warriors, which is combat veterans that mentor kids on the south side of Chicago. And one night driving home, he was killed in a drive-by. And it wasn't related to the program, but that sparked my interest in this program. And if someone could come back home and go through all the shit that they went through and still give back in a certain way, then maybe that's something that I could start doing, right? And so I reach out to this program, the Urban Warriors program. I get interviewed and I get hired, and it's as a mentor. And this is a course that's 16 weeks every Saturday from 9 a.m. until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it is on the south side of Chicago, Little Village, Pilsen, which is mainly Latino, and then the other south side, which is mainly African American. And so I'm a white kid from Seattle, Washington, sitting in a YMCA on the south side of Chicago with a bunch of Latino kids, and they're all staring at me like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, why are you in our neighborhood? Why are you here? And we do this thing called the hot seat. And this hot seat is where a vet sits in the middle of all these kids, and they're allowed to ask any questions of the first day. And it's my turn. They're pitter pattering around with questions. And I'm like, what's up? I thought you all were supposed to ask some intense questions. This is why I'm here. And then one of the kids goes, did you ever work with any dogs while you're overseas? And I was absolutely, I worked with multiple dogs, and I told him the story. And I told him the story I'm about to tell you all, and about this working dog we had named Baco. And this dog one night saved my life. And we were in Iraq. It was my 4th deployment. So it all blends together. I know that it's hard to remember specific facts like about a lot of these things. So it takes me. Sorry. 4th deployment. We're going after a cell of insurgents that was 8-man strong that had been moving through this palm grove around central Iraq. I'm not going to get too big in the details. There was an irregular army unit that was sweeping through a village to the north, and they were hiding from this unit. So we went out after them that night, and we set up what's called an L shape on this like camp. Essentially, they were in the center of this camp. And at the time, our restraints were we have to announce our presence before we raid. We like, it's called just a call out where you'd go, hey, we're Americans, give up now or not, and then we'll fight. And we do this by having a little bird buzz their camp, and then we start shouting over a bullhorn, and they all just start running in separate directions. So one of the guys runs straight south into one of our squads, and he gets captured, and he's like a 16-year-old kid, and they quickly get out of him that everyone else that's out there is wearing a suicide vest. And so we have one in capture. We have 7 people running around at nighttime in the middle of the jungle with vests on that are all coming at us right now. So 4 guys, it looks like they run straight north, and one guy comes running right towards our squad, and he jumps in this makeshift bunker that they had dug out during the day. I'm the number 1 man. I'm the team leader. I'm the point guy. I'm the front man, and I'm ready to go. Give me free reins. I'm going to go and take this guy down. And they go, no, we're going to send in Baco. We're going to send the dog. And I arguing, no, I got this. No, we're sending in the dog. All right. So I'm okay. I sit there. We send in the dog. Baco gets in the bunker, and he gets on bike. You hear the guy yell, and then bang, because he shoots the dog. He shoots Baco. So right when that happens, the canine handler goes, open up. And so we lay waste into this bunker. I end up throwing 2 hand grenades into this bunker to kill the suicide bomber. The hand grenade, the second one, landed so close that the explosion set his suicide vest on fire. So with explosives, you need pressure and heat for it to blow up. So since it got set on fire, it was just burning. This blue flame that was shooting out of his chest, like 4 feet, not 4 feet, it was like 2 feet long, right? My squad leader runs in, grabs the dog, throws the dog over his shoulder. He's dead, unfortunately. Gets out of the bunker. We were like 10 feet away, and then his vest blows up, okay? So like that right there is a story I tell these kids that are sitting in this circle, and just kind of like how all of you are staring at me right now, they are like, oh shit, like, okay, like this guy is legit. Like and from that second, it was like I was one of them. And the trauma that I had gone through showed them that I wasn't some sort of punk there to be some hero. I was there because I was going through my own shit and needed help too. And it wasn't, if it wasn't for these kids, like, I don't know what I would have done, and I wouldn't have found this purpose again. And one of those things that, like, that wasn't even the end of the story, and I didn't even tell them the rest of the night. And I think that this is and I want to tell this story because I really, this really is one of the things that affects my transition. So while I'm in the military and while I'm doing this deployment, I'm taking college classes online. I am operating at nighttime, going out and doing raids. And then during the daytime, I'm doing college work, right? Because I'm taking advantage of the free money that the Army is giving us to do this college. After this mission, so we have to go chase down all the other bad guys. They got, we used air assets to blast them all since we knew they had vests on. My squad had to stay. They made me an E5 sergeant who was, I think, 22 or 23 at the time, walk to all of these engagement sites and disarm the suicide vest myself with no sort of EOD training, right? And then at the last pile of guys that we get to at the initial campsite, they're laying like this, 1, 2, 3, right on top of one another. And I'm standing there with 3 other Rangers, and they're from another platoon that had come in to help replace most of our guys who had just been exhausted from fighting all night. And I'm like, sir, that is the last engagement site right over there. Those men have not been cleared. And by cleared, I mean, is when you clear a suicide bomber, when you walk up to them, you have to put 1 round in their head, because you don't know if that person is still alive. And if you walk up to them and they're still alive and they have a suicide vest on, the only way to stop them is if you shoot them in the head. So every single person I had to go do this to, except for these 3 guys. So I tell them that I have not cleared this engagement site yet. And as soon as I walk away, one of those guys was still alive and he clocked himself off. And all 3 of those Rangers got medically discharged from the military because they got so fucked up from that blast. When that blast happened, I had stepped through a hedgerow and I took a knee next to one of my buddies who was in my team. I was a team leader at this time. And all of a sudden, off the top of my helmet, I looked down, there's a human thumb that popped off the top of my helmet. And it was like a movie. This 24-hour period was like a fucking movie. And I didn't even believe what had happened. I have to go home back to base and go take a history test covered in blood of all of this shit that had happened the night before. In the middle of the history test that I'm failing, because I obviously didn't study enough, which is crazy, I get a page that we're going back out. So I have to walk to the proctor and go, hey, I need to leave. We are going out on a mission again because the suicide bomber cell leader came back up on, we found where he was at and he went out to go fight us. He was waiting. He was just waiting for us in the middle of the jungle. We go raid him. He blows himself up in the middle of the jungle, no issues, like no casualties. Go back, take my test and get a C, which because I saw the answers, was able to go back and kind of study a little bit more. So I know I'm kind of making this a little bit joking about this crazy situation, right? When I'm in college, all of my class of students got a teacher fired from her job because she put questions on a test that were not on her study guide. How horrible is that for that teacher, because she challenged her students and these people got her fired because they did not want to do this extra work. And here I am fighting a war and still doing my work to take these tests and proceed on with my future. And I'm just sitting there like, what is going on? I'm sitting in this class after a year and a half out of being in the military. And I'm like, what? Like, why did I go through all of this shit for you? Like, you guys can't even suck it up enough to read a chapter for a test. You're going to get someone fired. And I'm expected to just like swallow all of this trauma and be happy that I did this for you. And that was like my transition straight down after that point, because I completely lost who I was as a human being. I completely, like, all of the stuff that I thought I was proud of now was questioning in my brain. Like, was it even worth it? And it sucked. And this transition was so rough. Like, it was hard. And without a support group behind me, I was alone. And the people that I reached out to who I thought that could support me didn't. And it was not until I find this group of kids on the south side of Chicago and other veteran mentors who are mostly Marines from the neighborhoods. And we still have on my a group chat on Snapchat to this day that we communicate to each other with. And that's the type of thing. And this is where the power of the story comes in, is like, I didn't understand how impactful I can be when it comes to telling my story to youth. And because I don't know if I'm not a parent, but I've been told that children don't really like to listen to their parents very much. I know that because when I was a kid, I definitely did the exact opposite of what my parents told me to do all the time, right? But when a combat veteran steps in front of you and goes, hey, like this situation you're in sucks, but you are strong for being able to go through it, and there is a future for you when you're through it. They're like, what? Like someone supports me? Like I was working that ad agency. I was working in the Hancock building, which is the third tallest tower in Chicago. Like I've never ever thought I myself would get into a position or company like that, right? We were able to pull some strings, and my company hosted the Urban Warriors program for one of the sessions, and even paid for them to go up to the top of the tower. This is what was so sad. They live in this city. This is less than a mile away from them, and not one of them had ever been in there before. And it just showed you just these cultural divides of this city, that where if you didn't step into it, you would never know what's going on, right? And you hear a lot of rhetoric from leadership about we'll shut the city down and go house to house. That's not how that city works. Like, and if once you step in and learn, like there's a whole lot that could be done to affect these communities in a positive way that's not threatening. And it just, if it wasn't for this happenstance of things, I would never have discovered this program. I would never have. And at this point now, my mom had MS. She was like debilitating pretty quickly. And so after a year, I moved back home to help take care of her with my father. And so I got involved with veteran nonprofits out here, mainly the Mission Continues, which is a national nonprofit that's a service-based organization. So they'll have platoons in different cities, and these platoons will do community service projects for needed community. So like here, we partner with the Danny Wu International Garden, which is in downtown Seattle. And it's like a garden for Southeast Asian nationals who are living here to grow their own crops and their homemade, their natural crops from back home, so they can have them there for their market. And so I'm standing next to someone who I don't speak the same language of, but we're working on a project together, smiling. And it's one of those things that, like, it gives me that purpose and that happiness helping someone else, right? And so I really put all of my effort into doing this. And this is not even seeking counseling yet. Like, I'm jumping into these programs that are selfless serving, because I think that that's going to fix what's going on, right? By another distraction. Now, this is a positive distraction versus the negative ones that I was doing with the drugs and alcohol. So now this positive distraction starts working really well. It works so, like, I'm doing such a great job in Seattle that the Seattle Seahawks surprised me with Super Bowl tickets for the last game of the season for the 2018 to 2019 season. So I got to go with my girlfriend at the time, all expenses paid, to Atlanta and go see the Super Bowl. And because of the stuff that I was doing in my community, which that was kind of like, oh shit, I'm on the right track. This is awesome. I'm doing good. I'm actually getting recognized for it. This is so cool. And when I'm down there, I meet two individuals, Denver Morris and AJ Perez, who are members of MVP, or Emerging Veteran Players, in LA. And so they got sent by the Rams. And so it was just this crazy connection. They're one with a Navy corpsman and then a Marine. We meet at our hotel bar, because we're at the same hotel that the team put us up. We have a beer together and say, hey, well, maybe if MVP opens up in Seattle, I'll help you guys out, right? This is in 2019. Fast forward to COVID. we have one more step before COVID. 2019, right after the Super Bowl, my mom passed away, and she passed away in front of me, like in my house, screaming for help because she had a stroke, and it broke me. After seven combat deployments and seeing everything I've seen, like that broke me. I went off the deep end again, unfortunately, and even worse than when I was going through college, because it was more of an intense situation. And then finally, when my health seemed to be failing, I went and sought help at the VA. And I finally started going through their addiction treatment center for mental health counseling. And it worked for like 2 months, 3 months, but it really was, I wasn't resonating with my counselor. She's a very nice person, but it wasn't, the stuff that she was giving me wasn't helpful. It wasn't at all. And so like, I'm here, I'm trying to do the right thing, but it's not working, right? COVID hits in March, right? We all get locked down. Denver, the guy from the Super Bowl, reaches out to me and goes, yo, MVP has switched to virtual because we're all locked down. Would you like to jump on this call tonight at 7 p.m.? And I go, why would I want to work out at 7 p.m. over Zoom, Denver? And he's like, it was a joke, like make to him. And he's like, come on, just come check it out. And I'm like, okay, fine, I show it. Get in the call. The first thing that happens is I'm wearing a Seahawks hat, and Luke Wilson, the tight end for the Seahawks, is on the call. He goes, yo, bro, nice hat. I'm like, where am I? What is happening right now? And at first I was confused at what this organization was. And MVP was started by Jay Glazer and Nate Boyer. And I don't know if any of you guys know. I know who they are because they're my bosses, but if anyone else doesn't know who they are, Jay Glazer was a fighter in the UFC back in the day, and then now is a big coach as well as sportscaster for Fox. And he talks every Sunday for football. And Nate Boyer, the Green Beret, turned Texas long snapper, and then got drafted by the Seahawks and played a game or two, and then got out of the NFL. He's the oldest rookie in NFL history, which is super cool. People don't really know, but Jay trained Nate to make it into the NFL. And so Nate was living at Jay Glazer's house, training at his gym to go and made it into the Seahawks, right? One night they're together. Jay gets a call from one of his former fighter buddies, and Nate gets a call from one of his former Green Berets, and the conversation they're having is the exact same. Like, I'll never be as good as I used to be. I don't want to be here anymore. I hate my life. And they both are like, dude, like the transition out of sport is very similar to service. When you serve, when you're 13 years old until you're fucking 31 and you finally are off an NFL team, you've been thinking about football longer than you've been developing as a human, right? And so when your life is structured like that and you get out of that structure, just like a vet, a combat vet or non-combat vet, like you lose your mind. That structure is gone. You think you're good, and it comes crumbling down when you can't handle it anymore, right? And it's the same. And you'll see the headlines will be, veteran kills himself, former professional athlete kills himself, and it's blamed on CTE or head trauma, when it's a lot more when depression and mental health than people really think about. And so for me, when I get into this organization, like I never once was considered doing group therapy. I have to be very upfront with you all. Like I picture a bunch of old angry guys sitting around a circle being mad at each other going, you don't know what I've been through. And everyone's trauma is worse than the other person's around. At MVP, it's not like that. I'll share a story. Like the first 3 months I was on the program, I didn't even talk about my military stuff. I talked about my mom. And to finally have these people support me. And even one time I was like, dude, fuck all of you. Like, I'm not coming back. I'm in Seattle. You guys are all in LA. What do you care about me? Right. And I cut off a bunch of people from the program. And week after week, not one would reach out, but two, but then three, then four people. Hey, when are we going to see you again? Not any sort of judgment, not, hey, you're going to be back this week? I'm like, yeah, I'll be back this week. And then finally, it wore me down because like these people really care. They want to see me again, even if I am in Seattle from LA, right? And it after being such an asshole to everyone else in my life, that like the civilian friends I had that took me in after the military, like they couldn't handle the up and down. Like a lot of people like to say like life is a wavelength, right? It goes up and down like this. For me, it's like a 9.5 on the Richter scale all the time. So it's really hard for me to regulate my emotions consistently and act normally when on a daily basis. And having other people around me that understand and go through the same things, we're on different like timelines when we're going through these crazy cycles, right? So when we surround ourselves with 20 other people that are on an up and you're on a down, those people can bring you up. And that's one of those things that people don't kind of understand is you'll go to this program, you'll go for 3 months and you're like, oh, I'm good. I don't need this anymore. But that's not what we like to do. Like when you get good, you're good briefly. And this is something that a lot of vets like can't accept, but our trauma and all of this is going to be forever. Like my grandfather, I drove him to my mom's funeral. He couldn't remember who I was. But when I asked him about his time in the Merchant Marines in World War II, he's like, oh, I was in New York City when, it was like it was yesterday for him. And so that was kind of like the proof in the pudding for me, like this will be with me forever. So I have to forever constantly work on myself and push to try to seek more positive ways of healing and coping with my transition and stress from all of that trauma. And so like with MVP, like I found a group that works for me. And while it works for me, it's not for everyone. One of my good buddies, Ranger buddy, he doesn't give a shit about sports. And so the concept of getting together in a gym and working out and then talking about our feelings afterwards, he's not interested, right? But there are other things out there for him, like Michael, your ranch, right? I just went to the Wild Horse Rescue in Caliente, California for a veterans boot camp, right? Where they have you gentle wild horses that like they get from the BLM, and you sit in a pen with this wild horse who's never been touched by a human being before. And by the end of the weekend, they're like asking you to pet them because they teach you a way to interact with these creatures that is so true to life when it comes to like putting pressure on something and then getting a release out of it. And so this type of equine therapy, I never like 5 years ago, like what I'm terrified of horses. They're giant beings that could crush you if they really wanted to. But it's if you don't respect them, right? Like, and if you respect the horse and you learn about what makes a horse tick, it's a completely different animal from your perspective, right? And so being open to trying stuff that you normally wouldn't think would help is one of my biggest tips is try everything. Try everything, even if you don't think it's going to work, because you know what? One sentence from an entire weekend retreat could be enough to change your mindset on something, right? Whether or not you believe the rest of the 99% of what happened. And so that's one of my major things that I've learned. Be open to trying new things, right? 2, the transition process needs to start much sooner than a lot of people do, like 6 months to a year. And so one of the things that we've started to do at MVP is try to get more active duty individuals that are on their way out. So instead of them getting dropped, and I'm not saying that the military doesn't do a good job of keeping up with its retirees or vets, but the military doesn't do a good job of keeping up with its retirees or vets. And so it is on us veterans and supporters and allies, because we couldn't, this is a stat, right? 1 infantry guy to 10 support. And if it wasn't for those 10 support, 1 infantry guy couldn't do their job, right? So Travis, like, if it wasn't for me wanting to protect you, like that was my major drive. And to protect the people that, well, they just didn't want to join the military for whatever reason, or they couldn't. Like, I'm going to do it so that you don't have to, and you're worth it. And that was one of those things that to me, it was really hard to accept the thank you for your service from someone that didn't serve. But now, and a lot of us have talked about reframing it, is saying you were worth it. Because ultimately, while I do complain about my classmates, like, every single person in this country was worth the service that I went through and that I did, and regardless of their mindset or not. And I think that that's one of the things that we forget as well. And I think it's very important that we do include allies in conversations like this, because, like I said, like, none of those kids that I mentored were vets, but they listened like this. And we need the support. Us vets do need the support, not just from veterans, but from our civilian counterparts as well. And I think that that's just something that you'll run into the stigmas, right? Where there's like some sort of hierarchy where it's like combat vet, civilian, right? Where we're all here on the same plane. There's no person, just because you could be a Delta Force operator with 15 deployments, or you could be a cook who's never deployed. You're still serving your country, and you're still serving on behalf of someone that you're doing something greater than yourself for the good of the country. We're here. There's no here, right? And so it took me a long time to actually believe that. I was a person that, if you weren't a Ranger, don't fucking look at me. And it took hearing stories from my peers to humble me and realize that I'm not the hottest shit in the world, right? Like, I am just as equal as everyone else, male, female, black, white, brown, whatever, whoever you are, we're all the same. And that's really what I've had to learn since doing this program, is open your eyes and be open to change. And I think that's enough talking for me. I think that was 45 minutes straight, and I need to drink some water, everyone. So if you all have any questions, this is the time. I think that sums up the story, if that's cool.
Hey, Wes, thank you so much for sharing. That was more in depth in areas that I have not heard before. And one of the things that I personally just thought of when you just shared is, I want to be worth it to you as a civilian. I want to live my life and serve to make it worth it, your service worth it. And I thought that was really good. That's a message actually that I want to keep putting out there for our civilians. Like, are we living a life in this country for the people that have protected us, to where they feel like it was really worth it? Yeah. So
I think a lot of us are right now, especially with everything that's going on with Afghanistan. I read an article online, and it's like 68% of Americans don't think that the war in Afghanistan was worth it. And I'm like, oh, so 68% of America thinks everything that I did over there was for nothing. Awesome. Thank you. And so that's one of those things that, like, it sucks. And when we see stuff like that, it puts us back in a hole. And when the fall of Kabul happened, I've found myself going to a bar on my own, drinking by myself again, because all these bad habits are coming back from all of the shit that has happened in the past. And it's taken an active effort to prevent these things to continue to come back into my life. And so when the fall of Kabul happened, like, I've been out of the military since December 2012. I had an interpreter reach out to me that we had worked with, who's in Kabul and stuck. And I'm here in Seattle. The war's back. I've been out for 9 years. The war's right back in my front door, right? And thank God, somehow, because of the contacts that I still had and some of my friends still had, we were able to get him through the gates, because we had someone on the ground in Kabul, and get him to Canada. And so one of these things is like, this isn't over. We're still fighting this, and we will be now for quite a while, especially the Vietnam veterans that no one's mentioning right now, because it's like they're getting Vietnam again. And now they're all getting their their PTSD coming roaring back because they see us now and they feel for us, but then they also feel for themselves because they didn't get the response that we're getting back, right? And so that's one of those things. It's like there's all of these factors here that continually go through, and we are going to continually to have to work through together to come out on top of it. And it's just
I am hearing everything that you're saying. I'm hearing that on my end. And that's why I really want these stories out, because I feel like the stories educate the heart. They connect us, whatever we do in life. And Brian, you've got something to share.
I mean, I just kind of want to make a couple of comments. I don't know if you saw me nodding or whatever through your story, smiling and laughing and shit. Shit, man. I've been living with PTSD for like 20 years, right? I was active in the infantry, Marine Corps infantry, 50 caliber machine gunner when 9/11 happened, right? So I was active before it happened and then while it happened. I gotta tell you, man, just that whole the cycle of PTSD, the way it just sits with you and it sticks with you, and whether it's drinking or whatever else, I was smiling and laughing, laughing along first with some of the stories, but secondly with that concept that the more you keep your mind busy, the more you keep your mind active, and I tell this to people all the time, whether I'm talking to other people that have the trauma or whatever, I tell them all the time, I'm like, what the biggest thing that I've learned that's kept me going for 20 years has been to keep my mind busy, because the more I do, the more the demons stay at bay, right? And again, kind of like what you're saying, whether it's negative or whether they're destructive habits or constructive habits, that choice is up to you. But if you're going to keep going, if you're not going to be a number, another 22 or whatever, you got to keep that mind busy.
One of the things that I did really, and keeping that mind busy is great, Brian, you're absolutely right. But one of the things that I was doing that was wrong was keeping my mind busy for the wrong reasons. So like, instead of I'm going to do this for someone else because I need to get better for them, not now it's I need to get better for me, and I need to take my mental health priority number one before I can start helping other people. And because when you start helping, and that's the thing, is keeping your mind busy, negative or positive, is super hard, especially forever. So
yeah, no shit. And I'm right there with this. I'm glad you add that color. Actually that's what I'm doing as well. I'm a writer, producer, whatever at this point, storyteller. And the project that I'm working on right now is actually telling my story. It's not combat related trauma. I can get into that later. I don't want to distract from your topic. But I'm starting by telling my story to in one sense it's cathartic, but on the other side, it shows all these other people that they're not alone. It's happened to them, or the family and friends that surround these people that are hurting. Maybe kind of help them understand a little bit as well. But on the other thing I wanted to mention was, dude, I wish I'd met you in Seattle. I was up in Seattle for like 9 months. Actually, this shirt is from that's a Seattle veteran cohort program.
The WeWork one, I actually applied to that and
Bunker Labs. Bunker Labs up there, and I actually know the guys. You applied this time?
No, it was 2 years ago, and I was working for a home loan company, and I was trying to get an office space in there, and I get why they didn't let me in. So.
Okay, yeah. So I actually I was in it I think about 2 years ago. So we could have been in the same group.
We almost could have been.
But yeah, I know a bunch of guys up there, a bunch of veterans. I actually know somebody that volunteers at the Mission TMC as well.
Who say you have someone that does that up here?
Yeah.
What's his name?
Her name is Shalene.
Say again.
Shalene Duncan.
Shalene. Yeah, no.
Yeah, that's my girl.
A couple times. Yeah.
That's my battle buddy
awesome.
right there. Yeah, she's
that's awesome, Brian. Yeah, no. Shalene is the PL for the first platoon, and she's
okay.
I believe for the Danny Wu Garden now, and she took over from me when I stepped down. So
right on. Yeah.
Which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's pretty much all I had to talk about. But I sent you a LinkedIn. Might be cool for us to chat offline.
Yeah, absolutely. And real quick, the MVP, we're nationwide. And one of the cool things that again came out of COVID is we're starting these virtual sessions. And so the likelihood of us having a chapter in like Delaware, pretty slim to none, because there's not very many like professional sports teams that could support it. But now we have an East Coast Zoom chapter. So every Wednesday, if you're on the East Coast, or if every Tuesday you're on the West Coast, you can jump into a Zoom just like this, work out from your home, and then do a group counseling over Zoom.
I'm actually in LA, so that'd be, I mean.
So then if they do in person at Unbreakable Gym in West Hollywood. And that's something that you sign up, they'll contact you and you can show up that next day. So, and that goes for everyone. Like, unfortunately right now for the veterans, we are a combat veteran only nonprofit. And that is something that I am trying to get changed, because it should be open to all veterans. But one of the things that they had run into specifically in LA were people trying to take advantage of the program. And so there's a way that we have to kind of vet individuals. And so now what we've been doing was taking the VFW's method, and you have to submit a DD-214 to prove combat status before you can join. Yes, Daniel.
Why don't you use, you could just use ID.me to verify veteran status.
I'm not a head, this is up here conversation. I'm down here when it comes to our operations for that point, but that does make sense. The ID.me would be an easy way to do that. So we just have
that's what we do for veterans. That's how we verify them.
And that's for what program?
For our digital TV platforms, and we give veterans a discount. You do use ID.me. It's just a monthly service. You go over and pay, and they do all the work for the DD-14s and DEERs and everything else. It won't verify combat status, but if you wanted to go over and do that, it's a one status I'll verify. It also has first responders. It now verifies first responders also. So if you have first responders that have gone through, PTS and things like that, as you expand, you can just use that one system as a whole.
There's a plan to include first responders in the future for our programming. But again, we're 5 years old and we're new. And the virtual stuff, it took off during COVID, and we're still like catching up, if that makes sense, when it comes to the structure and how we're growing so quickly that we weren't really expected. Like the virtual stuff was never something that the organization planned for, right? And when COVID hit, they created it as a option for the members, and now it's taking off. And so we have to actually come up with a plan on how to support all of the country now with our virtual stuff. And so it's been great, but it also has had its hiccups. And so we're young. We're not like a Wounded Warrior Project or VFW, who have been around for quite a while. And it's, I think, 95% veterans that are on the staff for the organization. And so it's a really great opportunity, but there's a lot of growing pains that we've been running into. I think that happens in organizations. Sorry.
So my background's IT and virtualization. So if you need assistance, give me a call.
Awesome, Daniel. Thank you so much for the offer. Appreciate it, buddy. Chris, you had a question?
I don't know so much a question, just some takebacks from what you said, man. I've been in this group for probably a little over a year, somewhere around a year now. We've had a lot of fantastic guests, and I got to say that this is one of the most in-depth conversations that we've had, stories. It was extremely relatable. Your credibility kind of exudes through your pores, which draws more people in to listen. Something that you said to me that I've never thought of, and I think it's the most appropriate response, is you're worth it when somebody thanks you for your service. I always say, I'm blessed to do it. It's humbling. But I don't, and I think that's kind of a self thing. It's awesome. I'm able to do it. But I think to even give back in that moment to say, hey, you're, I'm doing that for you, I think is something that's fantastic.
It's hard for us to take gratitude sometimes, right? And so when someone's giving you that and you take away, this is what we literally talked about this last night, and you're taking away the one thing that they could get out of that, which is joy from doing something for you, right? So if you can say something that's going to make them feel better about it, then that's the way to go about it. And don't be, because I used to be a guy like, you don't fucking know what I did, don't talk to me, but nah, that's wrong. That is absolutely wrong. And now it's, you were worth it. And it makes way more sense. Sorry.
Absolutely. And I think that another word that we don't use very often, I don't think that I can recall, and Sarah, call me out on my BS if I'm wrong here, but the compassion that you showed for those kids in South Chicago, the compassion that you showed for these different individuals that you were around, I think gave you some groundation as well as helping them. I know for me, helping others doing these types of things is all I need for me to keep going forward. And that's my mission. That's my purpose. You just said something here a minute ago, and I think it was it Dan? There was for Brian that was talking about it, staying busy, and you're saying doing it for the right reasons, right? I'm a big advocate of that. But I think to take control, and I think most of us military folks have some control issues, maybe a little bit, that when you try to stay busy, rather than waiting for that shit to jump up and punch you or smack you in the face and bring the realization, maybe in those moments when you feel good, maybe you, when you find the courageous moment that you can dive back into that thought yourself, you dive into it. Don't let it take you by surprise, but you start thinking about those things that have happened in your past. And that way, I think that now you somewhat start taking control of that reconciliation in your heart, your brain, your soul, whatever it is that may be in ripples as your 9.1 on the Richter scale you speak about. What was your, and one question and I'll shut up now. When you left, if at all, because you had to see a bunch of different transitions that were pretty close together, so there didn't seem to be a lot of gap.
Correct.
We talk about giving ourselves a permission to grieve the loss of the military. Whether we hated it, we loved it, it's a part of our body for 6, 12, 20, 30 years or whatever. When you leave, as glad as you may be, there's also a sad part of it because you're no longer part of the group. You're no longer part of the tribe. You're not part of that
your team. Yeah.
When did you feel that loss? Because it sounds like you were probably pretty good through your first semester, whatever, at Central.
So before I get into that question, I wanted to say something about the compassion comment. And so some people, when they ask me, like, what's one of the biggest things that you learned in the military? And this always surprises them when I answer this, but empathy. And I know that this is weird because a lot of people like don't picture empathy and military in the same thing, right? But they teach you to think like your enemy, right? Put yourself in their shoes so that way you know how to fight them. But that can apply to a child. That can apply to one of your friends. Like the way that I can kind of just take myself out of my shoes and like really feel for another person comes from this weird way I learned empathy in the military. And I know that that's kind of weird, but that's where like the compassion aspect comes from. It's because I use my empathy to go, oh man, like this kid has to do route selection to get to high school every day, or he might get shot like in Chicago. Okay. I'm gonna could you all imagine that? Like it blows my mind. Just some of these things that if you really, really try to put yourself in someone else's shoes and feel what they feel, what you're capable of doing for other people, because then you're not like if someone cuts you off in traffic and you're like, hey, maybe they're on their way to the hospital. Maybe they're having a shitty day and they're a jerk and they just need to get that out of the way. And like, you can start, instead of getting these aggravating responses, you can kind of just start normalizing them. And that's kind of something that really helped me, is just kind of like, I really can't act like I'm the only person here. Like, you have to really, really try to realize that every single person around you is going through probably just as much shit, if not more than you. And so that right there is huge. Okay. And then when I felt like I lost my team, okay, luckily when I got out and I went to Central, I still had some friends like from high school that were still there, or some younger guys that were on the football team. And so when I got there, and my friend on the football team introduced me to his friends, the respect was immediate because of my background. And they come from like a structured program where authority means respect. Like you have to respect the coach on a college football team. You're not going to make the team, right? So they respected me. I would say they respected me versus my fellow students didn't, they didn't disrespect me, but they just didn't respect me on the same level. They didn't understand like the football team did. So I kind of had a team there, and I felt like I was an outsider, but I was still involved with them, and it felt good. And so that was kind of where that sports thing even clicks back in, where there is this structured and support and respect for authority in the sports world, just like the military. And so you kind of have the same mindset where you treat people with respect, and if they deserve it, because it's just hard to really disrespect someone when they're treating you like a teammate, right? And after they graduated, I think I was a year at the school where I didn't have that friend group, and that's when it kind of hit me. So I like did my internship in Chicago, came back to finish my last year of school, and that was the worst year, I think, because I didn't have really anyone at that point other than a bunch of my, like I said, civilian friends before. But like at the time, I didn't feel comfortable sharing any of the stories. Like I felt like I was gonna get judged or looked at differently because of some of the stuff that I did, right? But then when my PTSD symptoms, like one time, I remember vividly, it was the July 4th, 2019. We're in Seattle, and I'm like, hey guys, I can't be in downtown for the fireworks show. And they're all like, whatever, bro, like suck it up. And I'm sitting there like, I have an episode because I know when it's coming. I felt it, and I ended up ditching my friend group and Ian through downtown Seattle trying to find a cab to get me out of Seattle. And it took me an hour and a half on foot to try to get out because they didn't understand what they put me into. And even though I tried to explain it, it was too late. And it sucked. And at that point I was like, dude, I'm alone again. Like and so it wasn't again until finding this support group with MVP that I felt like I've had a real team behind my back. Like, so I have a dog, a German Shepherd. He's a year and 4 months. I named him Baco. I got him last year, so this is like the first time I've actually been able. I told the story online. That was like one of the first times I ever talked about it. Right? Get this puppy, and 2 weeks ago, he snuck out the back sliding glass door, got on the street, and got hit by a car. And he survived, thank God. But he had damage. He got hit on his ribs, like massive damage. And without knowing, my MVP chapter collected a shit ton of money for me and my vet bills and gave them to me and in my chapter. And it's so hard to accept a compliment, let alone that type of support. You know what I mean? And I haven't felt a lot of that type of support in such a long time that it's life-changing. And again, like, you just have to, a lot of the things that really prevent people from positive growth are not accepting that there's something wrong. And that was what took me so long, right? I'm fine. Like, I should be fine. I'm just dealing with shit that's normal, right? Once you take accountability, you can start to grow. And it's just be open to change and try. And that's the thing. The biggest thing is try. And because I think one of the things that I did was I just sat back and was comfortable with dealing with the shit. And now that I'm on an active try every single day to make it better than the last, I finally feel happy and like myself again. And so it's been, what year is it? 2021. Got out 2012, December 2012, like 10 years almost. And I finally now feel like I found my mission again. And so I think one of the other things is, like, Sarah, your son's in Ranger school right now. And I said, tell him not to quit. And I think that that's just kind of something that I have to now continue to tell myself on a daily basis when it comes to life. Like, you're not quitting, you're still moving forward, and you're going to fucking make it to the end. And whether that's how that end happens, it's not going to be because of you. And that's one of the bigger things that really helped me. Because I mean, like, I've had the police department come and take all of my firearms away because I was a threat to myself. That's how bad some of the situations have gotten. And so there is if this is one of the things that, like, we were very big on at Urban Warriors. And you're not going to be able to tell a kid to get out of a fucking gang, because that's not how that works. Like, you get murdered, like, out of a gang, you get jumped out of a gang. But what you can do is show them that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and there is a future after being in a gang. And one of the guys that was in one of the gangs now is a restaurant manager, and he as a 21-year-old, he manages an entire restaurant on his own. And so that's one of those things. It's like, I'm not going to say it was because of the program, but the support that we gave him and showed him that there are other options other than being in a gang, I think helped him make these decisions. And so that right there is like the words that you say matter to a lot of people, even though you might not think they do.
It's like when people have another option, like you showed them another way. Like there is actually another way without telling them to leave their gang. I mean, that's so cool. What a great.
You know what? I know this is crazy, but there's this thing in improv and it's yes and, right? Like this is like, so if you're doing an improv skit with someone else, you don't go, no, you don't, because that shuts the skit down, right? You say yes, and you add on to it, or you change it in a way where you're not disagreeing with that person, right? And I can apply that to everything. Like, and with these kids, it's like, yeah, you can be in this gang, and you could also do something later. Like, and that's something that is big. Like, yes, you can feel this way about yourself right now, and you can get better if you try. Like, it's just one of those. It's huge. Even it's one of the simplest things in the world. Yes, and.
It's amazing how language can really open the door, shut it down. That's a great technique like that. Listen, I want to respect your time. It's 12:08. So we're going to need to wrap up pretty soon. Does anybody else have any last comments before we say goodbye? I can tell you, I really appreciate you, Wes. I really appreciate you being so open. And I really do think the more our veterans, our protectors share their stories, the more that we as civilians understand. I had one veteran in class share his story, and I'm not a counselor. I'm not doing anything that I went to school with for. I mean, I use it because it helped me understand trauma, but I'm doing this to support our veterans and first responders because somebody shared their story. And you do it beautifully. I know I can speak for everybody. I just appreciate you. I appreciate your journey. I wish you well. And you have another family here.
No, thank you so much, Sarah. And I think one of the things, just to close out with,
Sure.
I've had this friend group since I was kindergarten, right? We've been together. There's about 20 of us, super close friends, but it wasn't until 2019, after doing this program, that I shared my very first story with them. And a lot of the things that I had heard from them was, hey, we were afraid to ask because we didn't think it was respectful. Whereas on my end, I was like, well, if they want to hear, they'll ask. And so there is this disconnect here between the civilian side and the veteran side that I'm trying to break down, because there is a way to ask to have a vet share their story respectfully. And this is something that I'd like to challenge anyone that is end up watching this is you're a civilian. It's okay to ask a veteran, like, hey, when you say thank you for your service, do a follow-up question with, hey, so what did you do? Like, what was your job? Like, and that just one question can change that vet's day, because now it's not so much of just a check the box, thank you for your service. It's this person genuinely wants to know what I did, which is cool, right? And back on the veteran end, like, don't be afraid to ask your friends if they want to hear your story. And there's a way to tell them where you're not bragging, where you're not trying to make them feel below you, but your story is your story. And if you hold it inside for your entire life, then no one will ever know who you really are. And so I think that that's one of those things that, like, be brave, be courageous, and take that risk. And if you are a civilian, ask, hey, if you ever feel comfortable sharing stories with me, I'd love to hear them, but I understand if you don't. Give them an out. And maybe that one prompt will be enough for them to start talking, and they won't stop talking for 2 years, because that's pretty much been me. And it's been amazing. And being able to talk about the experiences in a way where it's instructional and educational and not like I'm at a bar bragging is pretty great, and it's therapeutic. And so I'd really like to see other people do that as well. So that was it. Thank you so much for having me, Sarah, and everyone else. Like, this was awesome, and I can't wait to get to know you all in the future.
Thank you.